Hello, political science students. This is Professor Mariano Magalhães, and Dr. Danel has asked me to record a video lecture to be shared with you about comparative politics, which is obviously my area of expertise within the Department of Political Science. The way I want to do this is to talk a little bit about broadly speaking, what comparative politics is and what it studies, how research is done in a broad sort of way, and then talk a little bit about what I've done as a comparativist, which should prepare you to read the article that I've assigned for this class that we will be discussing next week. So what is comparative politics? So comparative politics, sometimes students come to the class thinking that comparative politics has to do with international relations. In fact, comparativists don't study necessarily the relationship between states, between countries. Very, very, very rarely do we do that. Really, the objective or the goal of comparative politics is to study what happens inside of countries, okay? The nature of a variety of phenomenon in countries. So it really is about looking at the internal operation from a variety of perspectives, from a variety of angles, using a lot of different concepts to understand systematically how countries operate, how they function. And so we can focus on a variety of different things in comparative politics. For example, we can focus on the politics of one specific country. We can look at either things that happen politically in a country at the national level or at a subnational level. So examining Brazil, for instance, which is the country that I focus my research on, is an example of comparative politics. In addition, we can focus on comparing several places. And notice that I say places because one thing that you can do is to compare a variety of countries. And that's typically what we think of in terms of comparative politics, is this cross-national systematic examination of countries focused on a specific thing, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you can also compare places within a specific country. So, for example, the article that you're reading for next week actually compares literally thousands of different municipalities in Brazil. So it doesn't necessarily have to be cross-national. It can be comparing subnational governments. For example, a lot in comparative politics has to do with regionalism. So there are comparativists that specialize in European politics, those that specialize in Asian politics or Middle Eastern politics. I specialize in Latin American politics, although I do also teach and have an expertise that I developed over the years in Middle Eastern politics. So there's a lot of regionalism associated with comparative politics. In addition, we can focus on comparing issues or processes in one or more place, and again, it can be cross-nationally. We also look at this over time. In other words, we look at it, from 20 years ago or 40 years ago and compare where countries are today over time. So why do we study comparative politics? For a variety of reasons. Comparative politics, people that are in this field, they want to understand different political issues that come up in various countries. That can be in terms of public policy, that can be terms of political parties, voting behavior, electoral outcomes, to then generate lessons, to create lessons, develop lessons that from one place or one space or cross-nationally that we can then apply to another geographic space. So, for example, we can talk about a variety of electoral outcomes based on specific electoral rules in parliamentary systems or in countries in Europe that could then be applied in democratizing countries in Africa or Latin America. And we do this systematically so that we can apply what we've learned in one setting to another setting. But the overall aim in comparative politics is really to develop a broad, generalized understanding of political activity through the creation, the development of theories, grand theories, of different kinds of theories to understand how politics, broadly speaking, actually operates. So the key here is to really develop these broad ideas that we then can apply elsewhere, and it's not just random thoughts or things that we don't understand systematically. So comparative politics substantively can be the examination of a variety of different topics. Okay, and I'll talk about what I've done, but generally speaking, we're looking at comparative politics can be the examination of power. In other words, in the classic Harold Lasswell definition, who gets what, when, where, and how is one way of looking at, or one thing that we study in comparative politics. Who has power? How do they gain power? How do they keep power? Another one that has gotten much more currency in comparative politics recently, especially as it relates to the global South, is the concept of citizenship. Who is a citizen? What does it mean to be a citizen? Who gets excluded from enjoying citizenship rights? Another area are political groups. These can be social movements, interest groups, grassroots organizations, and others. Obviously, one of the things that is a big focus for comparativists is the examination of political institutions, such as the armed forces, political parties, the legislature, and so on and so forth. We also tend to examine the process of decision making. How are decisions made in societies? What institutions play what roles, who is influential in making decisions at the national level, for example, when we're talking about bills that become laws. Another area that has been popular since the 1960s is the examination of, or the systematic examination of political beliefs. Also, we talk about this in terms of culture, political culture, the set of orientations that people have that guide how they interact with each other, how they engage in political behavior, and so on and so forth. And then all of these things really, in my view, and in the view of many comparativists in political science, boil down to studying democracy, because all of these topics really get back to this notion of democracy, which is obviously the focal point for the chapter that you read in class for this week. And that has been a big part of what I've done. I've really been a dabbler, is what I call myself, in terms of what I've actually studied over the years since I started this as a PhD student at the University of Iowa in the 1990s. My dissertation was actually on civil military relations in Brazil. The focus, as you'll see, is my research is on Brazil. I'm a Brazilianist, as some people call us, who focus on Brazil. I looked at why the military engaged in coup behavior based on the norm of what's called of civilian supremacy. I looked at that over time. Were there coups in 1945 and 1964, but not in 1992 when there was a very serious crisis in Brazil? I've also looked at and wrote an article on why people participate in civic activities, namely why do they join associations, and I connected that to their beliefs in certain areas of politics. An article I wrote a while back examined the impact of decentralization or devolution of power to municipal government in Brazil, looking at the cases of Pão de Açúcar and Penedo, and examining what impact that decentralization of power from the national government to the local government to the municipal government in Brazil had on civic participation. I've presented numerous papers on a variety of other topics, all of these really related to democracy, which is my main focus as far as my research is concerned. I've looked at the concept of state feminism, in other words, the extent to which women have a presence in government agencies and government agencies that are specifically geared towards the promotion and the defense of women interests, municipal councils in Brazil in particular, as well as I mentioned, I've looked at political culture in Brazil, looking at survey data and such. I actually am just finishing a chapter in a book on sustainable cities that was based on research that I did last year in Brazil. And again, this was a far away from what I'd been used to doing research on. And it was looking at, why community gardens are adopted in favelas, in poor communities in Brazil, and how are they spread across these communities. So I applied a concept of diffusion of innovation to understand why community gardens are spread there. And this was a topic that came out. I developed this topic, or this interest in this topic, or this curiosity, based on taking students to Brazil and visiting poor communities and actually witnessing these community gardens, or some of the innovative ideas that favelas had there. My current research is my next project. Actually is again something different than what I've done in the past. I am working with a group of students in the department to examine political polarization, but from the angle of social issues and cultural issues, and as well as economic issues across countries. We're going to be using survey data from the World Values Survey to examine how that plays out across countries, since it is such an important topic nowadays in the media. And so when we look at these topics, all of the topics that I've done research on are related to democracy. And the article that you're reading for next week is also on democracy, and I think it fits nicely into certain aspects of the chapter that you read in your textbook. In particular, the reading, the APSR article that you're going to be reading for next week talks about a certain aspect, or one of the components of democracy in the Griggs book, which you should be able to recognize. There is some statistical analysis in the article that might be more difficult to understand. Don't worry about that. Try to focus on more substantive discussion, more substantive information and conclusions that the authors draw regarding how democracy actually impacts the quality of life of individuals. And I guess I'll end there, and I look forward to talking to you next week.